Welcome to the Finding the Oasis Within experience, a podcast that journeys through the extraordinary stories of human transformation. Now here's your host, Tamara Kalani.
Hi everybody, and welcome back to Finding the Oasis Within podcast, the podcast that serves you in multi-dimensional ways. And if you've been following me in each of my episodes, you know Mama does not like to waste her precious time and likes to get straight into the content. So let's begin. Today's episode is going to be all about family relationships. Now this can be a very touchy subject for many. I know it was absolutely a touchy subject for myself in the past because I was paving a completely different path than what was expected for me. And I thought it's time to shed some divine light into this realm because it's not talked about enough. And this is the episode that's going to teach you how to navigate your own life path outside of your family's expectations. And I have the best possible guest for you in this episode because you know God is my boss, and he told me, T, the right person for this topic is Kute Blackson. And I said, say no more. Consider it done. So let me tell you a little bit about my friend Kute Blackson and why God chose him for this specific episode. First of all, he is a very gifted and well-known transformational teacher and national best-selling author of You Are the One. And for over 20 years, he has been inspiring audiences all around the world with his divine wisdom. From the first time of speaking in front of 3,000 people at age 8 to now helping organizations develop authentic leadership and achieve extraordinary performance, his electrifying presentations not only offer real-world, practical ideas and soul-stirring wisdom, but it also ignites the heart and inspires courageous action. One of the quotes that really stood out to me when we were on this episode together is when Kute said, "My fear was, if I share how I feel, if I express my truth, if I dare to be who I am, then I'm going to lose my Father's love, and I'll be an outcast." And through his journey of 4 years of going back and forth, soul-searching and questioning, and then finally when he reached the age of 18, he made the decision of not going to university and breaking the news to his father about leaving everything his father has built just for Kute. Because Kute knew in his heart that the path that his father has built for him was not truly his divine path. And Kute's mission is very simple. It's to awaken and inspire people all across the planet to access inner freedom, live authentically, and fulfill their true life's purpose. And as usual, I always love to give you guys the key takeaways from each episode so you know what to expect. And in this specific episode, you're going to learn how to follow your own path versus what's expected by you from your family, why forgiveness is the healer to any relationship, why learning how to surrender is the key to transformation, how to stop letting fear get into the way of speaking your truth, how to stop needing validation and love from loved ones, and to be at peace with your true self, why challenges show up more intensely when you follow your soul's purpose, and how to stop giving your power away to others. If you are someone who feels like the outsider of your family, and some like to call it like the black sheep, then you are the very person who will be changing and ascending your family's generational traumas, challenges, and hardships for the better. And this is the episode that will actually elevate your consciousness in life. So enjoy this episode, enjoy the story, and enjoy your mini transformation here on Finding the Oasis Within podcast. I'd love for you to tell us your story, starting from 8 years old, of who was Kute like, what was he doing, and what was your father's role at that time for you?
Look, I was born in Ghana, West Africa. My father's from Ghana. My mother's Japanese. I grew up in London. And I was a very empathetic kid. And so I felt people very deeply. I was very sensitive in that I felt people suffering. And there was a part of me that always wanted to alleviate suffering in some way. I didn't know what that would look like, but it was just a desire inside of me. And so my first memories as a young boy, I thought I had a normal childhood, but turns out maybe wasn't as regular as my other friends. And I think that was the beauty, because I grew up with a sense of possibility. Like my first memories as a young boy was seeing a crippled woman crawling on the floor, and she picks up the sand that this man walks on, my father, wipes it on her face and stands up, and he had no idea. And week after week, I grew up seeing blind people see and deaf people hear, and people stand up out of wheelchairs and experience healing and miracles, so to speak. And I saw this day after day after day with my own eyes. And so my father was considered the miracle man of Africa. He built 300 churches in Ghana, West Africa, hundreds of thousands of people, part of his organization, a huge church in London, about 4,000 to 5,000 people every Sunday. And so in many ways, he was a spiritual teacher, spiritual advisor, a great man, in his own way, human, imperfect, but had his own unique gifts. And so I grew up in this tradition with possibilities. My mother was Japanese, so I grew up meditating, because she was raised Buddhist. And so it was a bit of an eclectic upbringing, but I always felt a sense of a connection to the divine and a connection to something beyond physical and the sacred. And so I grew up in this, you could say, sacred context. And it's not like my childhood was perfect, but this was the background that was there. And everything was really in service to helping people in some way. And so when I was age 8, I started speaking in my father's churches. I was thrown into the audience one day, and my father said, speak. And that began my speaking career. And at age, I would say 14, I was ordained as a minister, and I was given the mandate to take over my father's spiritual organization. It was announced one Sunday, and my life was pretty much set out for me, and the entire trajectory was set out for me to take over. No discussion, no conversation. It was just, this is what my son is going to do. And so my father was, he was very old school in many ways. I would say even patriarchal in many ways. It was just my way or my way, and that's it. And so there wasn't really much of a conversation or a choice. And my entire life was set out for me. My path was set out, expectations, hopes, dreams of hundreds of thousands of people. But I think deep down, I knew that this was not my path. I knew that this was not my destiny, my trajectory. But I think, like many of us, I was too afraid to speak my truth. We often allow fear to stop us. We often allow fear to hijack our dreams. We often allow fear to stop us from expressing our voice and being who we really are and sharing our gifts with the world. And so my fear was, if I share how I feel, if I express my truth, if I dare to be who I am, then I'm going to lose my father's love. Then I'm going to be alone. Then I'm going to be outcast. Then what the hell will happen to my life? And so I went along with it. And it wasn't like I was forced. I kind of tried to rationalize and negotiate in my mind and sort of convince myself that this was the path that I wanted to go down. And yet I think that there was a deeper sense and a deeper knowing that something wasn't aligned, a deeper sense and a deeper intuition, a deeper feeling that there was a different calling for me, and even though I didn't exactly know what it was. And so it took me about 4 years of really inner turmoil, and my father and I didn't talk about it, and it was just expected. And so 4 years of internal investigation, inner turmoil, back and forth, soul searching, meditation, praying, questioning everything. And when I think at 18, 17 and a half, 18, I came to the point where I had to make some decisions. I chose not to go to university. I figured life has more to teach me than school. And so around that point, I felt my soul calling me to come to America. I felt my soul calling me to come to the US. I felt my soul calling me to go into the field of self-help and spirituality and personal growth, because, I would sneak into my father's office, and all of the books on his bookshelf were self-help, spiritual, personal growth type books, everyone from the Eastern mystics of folks like Krishnamurti to the Western mystics of folks like Gurdjieff, to the sort of pop psychology, Wayne Dyer, Louise Hay, Marianne Williamson. And so this was my life. And I saw a new possibility of how to make a difference in people's life that was different than the church. And I think when your soul guides you to do something, it won't always make sense to your mind. It won't always be comfortable or convenient. But I really believe that when you follow your soul and when you follow this intangible inner guidance system inside that we all have, you will always end up in the right place with the right people, doing the right thing, even though the route that you take may not be the one that you most expect. And so the calling was so undeniable. I felt like I didn't have a choice. And that was come to America, go into these fields, find some of these people that you've been reading about and just begin. And it was terrifying because I knew what this would mean, because when I looked into my future and I saw that I could take the expected path, and many of us, we follow the expected path that's laid out for us. I could take the comfortable path, the expected path, and I projected into my future, age 20, age 30, age 40, age 50, age 60, on and on. And I could be successful following this path. But if I don't have myself, if I don't have my truth, if I don't have my soul, if I don't have my integrity, like what kind of success is that? And the pain of self-betrayal was so sort of strong that I knew I didn't really have a choice. And I saw that if I begin to lie to myself now to get love, validation, and approval from my father, who I wanted his love, validation, and approval as a young boy, I'm going to have to live this life for the rest of my life. And I think that was so scary that painfully, I just knew what I had to do. And so that's when I had the conversation with my father. And
what did that conversation sound like for somebody at 18 to go to his father and talk to him about what your intuition, the compass is telling you what to do versus...
It was terrifying. Yeah, it was very scary. I thought my life was over at 18, I was sure that we would never speak again for the rest of my life. And so I had to pretty much make peace with that reality. I had to set him free. I had to let go of any expectation that we would have a relationship and grieve it. And so before the conversation, there was a deep sense of heartbreak and grief in knowing that I would be disappointing him, that I would be, in his mind, letting him down, maybe even betraying him. And I just had to make peace with that we would never have a relationship. And I think when I made peace with that, not that it was easy, but it freed me from any expectation. Anything basically above that was a bonus. And so when I really grieved that and took the time to grieve the loss of what I wanted, which was love, validation, and connection, there was tremendous heartbreak, but there was also tremendous freedom. And so I remember being like, sometimes people think that when you feel your soul's calling, when you find your purpose in life, things are easy. Like the unicorns come and the violins come and the lights come.
I will tell you no.
Right. Sometimes when you find your purpose in life, that's when the real challenges, the real difficulties start. That's when you have to go through a series of soul tests and soul challenges, not because you're on the wrong path. And that's the mistake I think people make when they follow their purpose and shit hits the fan and then there's challenge after challenge after challenge. We mistakenly sometimes think that we're on the wrong path. And then
we're being punished.
Then we turn back, right? And then we give up, like, I'm on the wrong path, so I'm going to go back to what was because this is not working out. But I think sometimes they are soul tests that we have to go through that actually symbolize to us that we're on the right path, that we have to go through these soul tests in order to grow, in order to evolve, in order to resolve, in order to heal, in order to transform, so that we can become the people, we can develop the mental, emotional, spiritual, psychological, psychic capacity to be able to fulfill our soul's dreams and mission. And so it was challenging. And so I remember that conversation, I sort of tiptoed up the steps and my father was in bed and I looked him in the eyes and I sort of squeaked out like, Dad, I need to speak to you and I don't think I can take over your church. And I'm expecting him to throw stuff and go crazy. All he said was, are you sure? I said, yes. He said, are you sure? And I kind of said, yes. And we didn't speak pretty much for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
That was the end of the conversation. And I remember feeling so desolate, so abandoned, so alone. The only person that supported me was my mother. And so I just felt so alone. And I remember sitting in my room at 18 years old, no money, no family support except my mother, no community support, no college degree, no freaking prospects for life, and feeling so alone. And I remember saying a prayer to God saying, okay, God, you've given me this vision for my life. You've given me this vision, this sense of possibility. You've given me this vision of making a difference on the planet. But like, I just feel like I'm dropped in the middle of the ocean with no bearings, no guidance. Like, if any of this stuff that I've been reading, and I've read hundreds of self-help books to this point, if any of this stuff is real, I need to know. And I think it was literally days later, I was in the library of my school, and someone hands me a magazine called The Economist. And I'd never read this magazine, but it was this old economics magazine. And I look at the back of this magazine. I felt chills in my body. And I think this is where we have to like follow the clues. And sometimes the clues don't come in like loud siren bells, but they come in small signs. And many times we look for a sign, but it's not the sign that we think. So we ignore it. And so I look at the back of this magazine. It says the American government's giving away 55,000 green cards in the green card lottery. And I think to myself, oh shit, wow. And I felt literal chills in my body. And I knew I was going to win. I was going to win a green card. And so long story short, it's a long story, but to cut it short, I ended up winning a green card in the green card lottery. And that's what enabled me to come to the US with 2 suitcases, $800 in my pocket, and just showed up, with nothing other than a dream. And it was challenging. It was challenging. I was told that when I applied for the green card, the lawyer in the US who did the application basically says, look, if you don't hear by September the 18th of this year, just move on with your life. They won't tell you haven't won. And so every day I'm visualizing and, do my affirmations and seeing myself in America. And every day I'm expecting a letter in the mail, and nothing for 4 or 5 months, nothing. September the 18th rolls around. I'm definitely expecting it now. And nothing shows up, and I'm pissed off, and I'm mad at God, mad at the universe, mad at life, feeling horrible, feeling like a victim, just mad. And I tell my mother, look, I'm going to go to the US. I'm going to pack my bags. I'm just not coming back. I mean, basically it's illegal, right? But I'm like, I'm going. I feel this guidance. I'm going. And that night, so I packed my bags, and I'll never forget that night, we got a phone call. My mother picks up the phone, must be 11 p.m. at night. And she says, it's someone for you. I pick up the phone, and I hear this voice on the other side, on the other line. And basically it's a guy with an American accent. Says, is this Mr. Blackson? I said, yes. He says, look, this is a law firm which applied for you. You've literally we just got notified that you have won a green card. And it's a miracle. It's never happened to us. And I was jumping around thinking, it's a miracle, and I'm going crazy, celebrating, hugging my mother. In the middle of my celebration, I heard this gentle voice that basically says, Kute, why are you so surprised? You knew. So like, why are you acting like you didn't know? Like, did you not trust? Did you lose faith? Like, why? And in that moment, I just knew that there was some intelligence that is guiding my life. And that's what brought me to the US. And then I came and found many of the teachers, the mentors, the authors that I read about, studied with some of them, learned from some of them, went to some of the seminars. And a few years after that, being in the US, I really wanted to go deeper in my own spiritual practice. And so at a young age, I put everything in storage, and I traveled to Israel and, met some rabbis, walked the Camino for 900 kilometers, went to Thailand with some monks, and ended up in India. And for me, it was really my time in India that cracked me open to another level of...
How old were you at that time?
22, 20, in that zone. I was in the US a few years. And so it was really around that time that I really had some experiences in India that just opened me to another level of reality and my nature. And that was really profound, And so that's when I came back to the US and began working with people one-on-one. I was a kid, 23 years old, just working with people one-on-one, and no idea what I was doing. This is before Instagram and Facebook and coaching was social media. Before coaching was even a thing. And so I just started to evolve my own way of working with people. And things just expanded from there. One person, two people, three people, five people, 10 people. People started coming from around the world, small groups, larger groups, and two best-selling books. So that's a bit of the story, And then my father and I, we reconciled a few years into that, in my early 20s, when I came to a place where I did this men's seminar. I forget even what it was, what it was called, but we went into the forest and did men's stuff for like a weekend, and I remember getting in touch with such rage and anger at my father. And I remember having this opportunity to really forgive him, as a man. And there was a process where I just forgave my father, and I was in tears, and I just loved him as a soul, and I just forgave him. And the forgiveness was so deep. And I think that was the beginning of healing with him, that I realized, I was waiting for my father to apologize. I was waiting for my father to make amends. I was waiting for my father to love me. I was waiting for my father to value me. I was waiting for my father to say, look, I wasn't a great father and forgive me. And none of that was happening. And so I think many times we hold ourselves hostage by being right and waiting for another person to make some sort of amends, not realizing that we're giving our power away. And I think it's only when we take responsibility that we start taking our power back, that to really get complete with someone, it has nothing to do with the other person. It really has everything to do with your relationship with the other person inside of yourself. So you can free yourself and get complete with another person, even without the other person being alive or the other person knowing. It's about your relationship with them within your own mind. And that's a decision, and that's an intention, and that's a choice. And so I made that decision, like, I'm going to be free. And I totally forgave him, truly forgave him. And there was nothing but love. And I literally remember within a week, my father called me out of the blue. It was like a miracle. My father calls me out of the blue after not speaking for years. And he says, I think we need to talk. And that was the beginning of a slow journey of healing.
It's so beautiful, Kute, just hearing you speak your story, especially where you are right now in your journey. And it sounds like to me, you've had to learn the art of surrender throughout your journey. I think that it takes a lot of courage to surrender in order to see, especially your parent, who we look up to hold us, to guide us, to validate us, to love us. But sometimes we actually have to be the ones that give us the validation, give us the love, the courage, and to hold the space for ourselves, and to learn how to kind of dive deep into the divinity within us. And so I would love for you to talk more about the art of surrender and how it served you in your own journey.
Yeah, look, The Magic of Surrender is the name of my new book, the latest book, and something I'm really passionate about, because it's something that when I look back on my life is what I've lived, even in moments I didn't know that that's what I was living. And I see so many moments of my life where I was living surrender and I was practicing surrender. And it's the key that unlocked the door to the next level of my life. So I believe that surrender is the most important thing that we can do as human beings. I think it's part of why we're here as human beings, to surrender ourselves to who we really are and what we really are. And I think that surrender is the real secret to manifestation, that surrender is a real key to the next level of our lives. Surrender is the real key to greatness. If you look at the truly great people that have lived throughout history, they all surrendered themselves in their own unique way. Jesus, Buddha, Gandhi, Mandela, Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King, in her own way, Oprah, in his own way, Elon Musk, love him or hate him. They all surrendered themselves. They surrendered themselves to the divine. They surrendered themselves to their soul. They surrendered themselves to their deeper truth. They surrendered themselves to that purpose that was bigger than themselves. In that surrender, they transcended their own human limitations. And I think that they were able to tap into another dimension of their own potential. And in that surrender, life was able to use them and express through them and manifest through them in, I think, ways that went beyond their own limited human capacity. And so I think surrender is that key to greatness. Surrender is the password to freedom. And so, look, The Magic of Surrender book for me was not the book I wanted to write.
Really?
The Magic of
This is
Surrender book
surprising.
was not the book I intended to write.
Mm.
I sat down after my first book was a bestseller, and I said, okay, I want to write another best-selling book. And, what book's going to get me on Oprah? What book's going to, be a New York Times bestseller? What book does my audience want? What all the marketing stuff that we should think about. And I came up with all of these clever ideas. But honestly, none of these, when I looked at this whiteboard I have of clever strategy, none of it resonated. None of it felt true, real, and authentic, if I was honest. The only word that I put on this board out of hundreds was the word surrender. And I could feel the energy pulling. I could feel like this is it. And I thought, oh shit, I don't want to write about surrender because, we resist it as human beings so much. We resist it so much. And we know we should do it, but it's like going to the dentist that we resist it and we fight it. And most of our life is spent resisting, surrendering. As human beings, we're resistance machines. And so I had to surrender to the book about surrender. And I had to surrender to realize that this book about surrender had a soul of its own. And this was the book that was seeking to be written, not necessarily the book I thought I was going to write. And to me, this is the essence of surrender. Surrender is to let go of control, or I should say the illusion that we're in control. Surrender is to stop trying to force and manipulate life to fit our limited ideas of how we think it should be and who we think we should be and how we think other people should be. And surrender is to take the limitations off of life. Is to be available, is to be open, is to allow life to lead us, to allow life to show us so that we can be truly open to the highest unfolding, the highest expression of what is seeking to happen. And so, to me, I think if we look at the last few years, and so when I was contemplating the idea of the book, and I finally surrendered to the book that was seeking to be written, everything about my life began to make sense. Everything about my childhood, everything about how my parents met, everything about my upbringing, everything I'd gone through started making sense. And I felt like this was the book that I was designed to write. This was the theme. This was the message. This was a major part of my purpose. And so that was so empowering for me. And so I'm so passionate about surrender because I feel the power of it. And so when I look at the last few years, since 2020 and what we've gone through as a humanity, it was not something we expected. I feel as though we have been in a global seminar on surrender as a humanity, and we are being initiated into a whole new way of living. We're being invited to move from an ego-based way of living to a soul-based way of living, which is all about surrender and living in alignment with our souls. And so the old ego-based model or way of creating life is all about like, what do you want? Get clear on what you want, know what you want. And I think that's great. You can manifest that way, you can live that way, you can create that way, and you can manifest some great, good things. But I think there are limitations in this model because when we are manifesting, living, and creating from the logic of the mind or the lens of the ego is conditioned, and the ego is not able to see the infinite possibilities of what is seeking to happen in a moment, in a relationship, in a situation. So when we create from ego, whatever we create will still be in a paradigm of limitation. And so, you might get everything that you thought you wanted, only to realize that, what you thought you wanted was not what you really wanted. It was just what you thought you wanted based on who you thought you were. And many times our goals can be projections of unmet needs from childhood, for instance. And so for me, in the paradigm of surrender, there's a different question. It's less about what do I want? What do I want? It's more about asking a different question, an infinite question. And that question becomes, what is it that life is seeking to express through me? What is it that the universe is seeking to express through me? What is it that this divine intelligence is seeking to express through me? What is it that God is seeking to express through me? What is my soul seeking to manifest and express? What is the deepest impulse, the deepest truth of what is seeking to express through me? And to be still and to listen and to attune and to intuit and to feel what that deepest expression is. Sometimes it won't be what we want it to be, as in my book, or sometimes it won't be what we think it's going to be. But I believe that when we truly catch the vision, the deeper vision that arises from an unconditioned dimension of our being, then we're not creating in limitation. Then we're not putting limits on the universe, limits on life. Then we can kind of catch the vision for what is seeking to authentically express the deepest truth, the highest version of reality. Then we can align our mind, our feelings, our visualizations, our thoughts, our money, our resource, our strategy, our planning with what is true, with what is authentic, and then give 100% to that path, that endeavor. And so I think part of surrender is allowing life to lead us rather than us pushing life from the level of the mind.
Absolutely. I think that's really beautiful, especially with the questions that you ask yourself. I will tell you, being 30 now, the questions I ask myself are very different than it was just even a year ago. It's more of how can I serve? I think for me personally on my journey, it's more of how can I be of service to myself, to my soul, to God, and then how can I be of service also collectively? And so I've had to learn a lot of surrender on my own and to be still. And I think in the world that we're living now, everything is extremely stimulated. It's very hard to sit still and to be present and to be off of our phones, off of technology, or especially, you know, if you're traveling all the time and you're busy and you have lots of businesses, how can you teach people to be still and to be mindful? That it's okay sometimes to step away from all these stimulations and to tune into the heart, to understand the guidance that we have within us and the power that we have and that we hold and we harness. And it's not just supposed to be for us, that we are here to service others as well. So how would you teach somebody how to be still?
I think the only way to be still is to be still. You know, to create the spaces, at least start by creating the time and the spaces in your life where stillness can happen. Because I think so many of us, we're so busy running around, busy doing, everything, every minute, schedules, every 10 minutes, every 2 minutes, that there's no time to be still. There's no room to be still. So even just basically technically starting by scheduling spaces of stillness in your day, where for 5 to 10 minutes, as an example, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 2 minutes, you know, whatever it takes to just start, that in that time, that's your stillness time to just sit and do nothing, to sit and just be, to sit and listen. See, part of it is we are actually afraid to be still, because I think sometimes deep down, there is a deep fear on two levels. There is a fear that if I am still, I might actually then tune in, listen, hear, feel, sense a deeper truth that I'm not really in tune with right now. I might get in touch with a deeper truth that I'm not listening to. I might actually start feeling, I'm not in love with my spouse. This job sucks and I hate it and it's not aligned. It's not my true purpose. It's not my calling in life. We might start getting in touch with deeper truths that we've been lying to ourselves about. And so sometimes being in a constant state of busyness becomes an avoidance from the truth. And so we avoid the truth and we avoid stillness by we avoid stillness by busyness, and as a result, we can avoid the truth. And by avoiding the truth, we don't have to take action. We don't have to change. We don't have to do anything differently than we're doing. We can kind of keep the same comfort zone of familiarity. So busyness becomes an avoidance of truth. So it's not just fear of stillness. And so I think if you just schedule the space and the time to sit, that's the beginning, you know. And I think one of the things as human beings that keeps us stuck, one of the things that keeps us from going to the next level, one of the things that keeps us from breaking through are all the ways that we lie to ourselves. I think as human beings, we are, for reasons which we can get into, but as human beings, we are constantly lying to ourselves, most of which is, some of which is unconscious. From childhood, we're conditioned to lie about who we are and what we want and what we feel. So now we take that into adulthood. And so now we're conditioned to lie to ourselves. We stay in relationships that we know are not aligned and we're no longer in love. We work jobs that we hate. We say yes when we mean no. We betray ourselves to get love, validation, approval from our parents, from caretakers, from those in the world. And so we've become in so many ways disconnected from our truth, and we wonder why we're not happy. And so I think one of the places that we have to start is the willingness to tell ourselves the truth. The challenge is we're often afraid to tell the truth because we're afraid of the consequences of telling the truth. Like, what will happen if I tell myself the truth? Then what's going to happen to my relationship? If I tell myself the truth, what will happen to the life I've built? If I tell myself the truth about my job, how will I survive? And so I just tell people to ask themselves, number one, what lies am I telling myself? There is no transformation without truth. And we have to want to be free and want the truth more than we want what we have, and more than we want what we think we want. And so what lies am I telling myself? If we're willing to get very real and very raw and very honest in a simple way, just start telling yourself the raw, real truth about who you are and what you feel. Now, I think one thing that might help people is to take off all of the pressure of having to take action, because sometimes the fear of taking action sort of shuts us down, and then the ego protection mechanism starts playing this game of, well, I don't really know. I'm confused. I'm not sure I'm not sure what my purpose. I'm not sure if this person's the one. I'm not sure if I should leave. I'm not sure if I should stay. Well, deep down, we know, but we're afraid of acknowledging the knowing. Thus, we're afraid of being still, because we're afraid if I'm still, I might have to actually get in touch with the knowing that I sense is there, so we stay busy. And so I think if we're willing to take the pressure off of ourselves from taking action, you don't have to take action. Just acknowledge the truth. So it might sound like, I hate my job. This is not right for me. I know it's not right for me. I hate it. I need to change this. It's not right for me. But you don't have to leave. You don't have to hand in your notice. Just marinate and sit with the feeling of the truth. Sit with the truth. Feel how it feels. You might sit with, you know what? I'm not in love with my partner. I have not been in love with this person for 3 years, or I know this is no longer aligned. It's scary. Just sit with that. You don't have to break up, but just sit with that and let the truth marinate. So what lies am I telling myself? What am I pretending to not know, right? You don't have to take action on it, but also sit with the feeling of the pain of the disconnect, the pain of the lie. In so many ways, we don't want to sit still because we start getting in touch with the pain that is already there. And so in our culture, we have this misconception that the pain is bad, the pain is wrong, that something's wrong. But I'm actually saying the pain is your friend. The pain is a blessing. The pain is a gift. The pain is feedback. But we're so conditioned to avoid the pain, hence don't sit still, because you might feel the pain. So just keep going and you won't feel the pain. And so we're so conditioned to avoid the pain. But the pain is trying to tell us something. The more we avoid it, the more in pain we actually are. And so I think if we're willing to just sit with the pain, to acknowledge the pain. But what we do is we drink it away, we smoke it away, we sex it away, we drug it away, we social media it away, we work it away, we busy it away, that we disconnect from the pain and we perpetuate our situation. And so acknowledge the pain, feel the pain, not wallow in it, feel the pain. Because if you just be with the pain and feel the pain, then you can begin getting in touch with, what is this pain trying to tell me? What is this pain trying to communicate to me? What is it trying to speak to me? And then we can listen to the message of the pain and begin to course correct, begin to shift, begin to make little changes in our lives. And so I think that's one thing. Schedule spaces to sit and just be and listen. The other thing is, one of the reasons we're also afraid of stillness and just being is because, and this is really one of the reasons we are afraid of surrender. The ego, which is not good or bad, is just a vehicle that we use in this human dimension to navigate this existence in this 3D realm. Everybody has an ego. You have an ego. I have an ego. Dalai Lama has an ego. It's just in your relationship to the ego that this is the key.
Very true.
And so ego is the sense of self that we mistakenly believe ourselves to be. It is the sense of self that we identify with so tightly, and now we believe ourselves to be that: mind, body, name, form, nationality, gender, etc., memories, history, past, traumas, etc. And the degree to which we identify as this is me is the degree to which we are in ego, and the degree to which we're not free. And so I think to really understand, to really shift your relationship with something, you have to understand the nature of something. And to understand the nature of something is to create a different relationship with something. And so surrender, I feel, is really natural. It's actually easy. But the ego's job, you see, is to reinforce its existence. And the ego's job is to protect you from getting hurt again, like you were hurt back then, to make sure you never get that hurt again, ever again. And so for the ego, surrender or stillness, being still, doing nothing, feels like a death, because one of the ways the ego wants to reinforce its existence, reinforce itself, I'm alive, I'm here, I'm me, I'm alive, here I am, I'm an independent, separate entity, is busyness, constant activity, doing. And so the ego wants to constantly run the show. And one of the ways it does that is to try to control everything. And the ego feels, if I can control everything, I won't get hurt again. If I can control everything, I exist. If I can control everything, I am the doer, and I am something. And so to let go, to be still, to do nothing, to surrender, feels terrifying for the ego, because surrender, stillness, which is why we also avoid meditation, stillness can feel like a death. Surrender can feel like a death for the ego. And so when you say surrender, this is why we often fight and resist. And resistance is often a natural response to stillness, to meditation, to surrender, because meditation, true meditation, is a form of surrendering, a deeper surrendering to one's truth, a deeper surrendering to one's being. And so I think that when we understand that surrender is our natural state, stillness is our natural state, surrender is our natural state. If you look at a child, before they're really conditioned, a child will jump on the table naked and sing. It doesn't care, what do I look like on Instagram? How much cellulite do I have? Can I sing like Adele? A child doesn't care. We just sing, fall down, we poop, we scream, we snort, we hit our head on the table, we cry, we just surrender to the moment. We cry, we get over it, we move on. We don't even remember that moment. 2 days later, 2 hours later, we're just in the moment, on to the next. We're in a constant state of surrender. So what happens? I think it's helpful for people to just have an understanding of what the hell happens and why we avoid stillness and why we avoid surrender. And so we incarnate into this human experience, these free, surrendered beings. We meet our parents. And our parents, God bless them, they're interesting characters. All of us have interesting parents, right? They're just doing the best that they can do based on their childhood, their upbringing, their parents. And now we are born into a generation of a pre-framework of conditioning of our parents and their unresolved stuff, and then their grandparents and generational beliefs, karmas, patterns, ideas, ideologies, paradigms. We're born into this, and maybe dad is crazy. Maybe mom is an alcoholic. Maybe they're fighting all the time and there's dysfunction, pain, trauma, abuse. Maybe they're great people, but they just didn't know how to meet our emotional needs. And that was painful. And so as children, two things happen. The first thing is we learn all sorts of strategies to disconnect, shut down, and not feel as a coping mechanism. So we suppress emotion to not feel. This emotion builds up. And then also we start contorting ourselves into a kind of shape in order to not feel the pain of not getting those needs met, to not feel the pain that mom and dad are fighting all the time. And so we erect all sorts of walls around us as a protection mechanism that we hold on to keep ourselves from feeling, to keep ourselves safe. And now we hold so tightly to that way of being as a way of safety and control, that this becomes so fused in our identity as a protective mechanism that we actually now think this is who we are, and we take this way of being into our adulthood. It worked for us when we were 5, kind of works for us when we're 10, sort of works for us when we're 15, but now we're 25 and 30 and 45, and many of us unconsciously are still locked into the same protective ways of being that we learned when we were 5 to avoid pain. But now we're 30, and now it starts getting in the way, and now it starts limiting our relationships, and now it makes us unable to receive love or give love in certain ways, because to let go, to surrender, to change, this is why the ego doesn't want to change. The ego wants everything and everyone else to change, but it doesn't want to change because change feels like a death to our perceived sense of self.
Yeah.
And so we also learn a way of being, the sense of, who do I need to be in order to get love and validation and approval? Oh, for me, I thought I needed to be the perfect son, the good boy, the caretaker of everyone in my father's community. And so we start developing all sorts of roles and masks and personas and a character and an identity and a way of being that we think is going to get us love, validation, and approval. Again, it's survival. And we kind of contort ourselves into a shape, becoming this person. And we actually think that the version or the pattern of ourselves that we have become is who we are. We think that's who we are. The only thing is, it's just a program. It's just a patterning. It's just conditioning. And the degree to which we identify with this version of ourselves that we've become, the independent one, the victim, the know-it-all, the blame one, whatever role or mask we develop, the degree to which we hold on to that is the degree to which we're not free, and we think this is who we are, but it's really not. And most of the time, we're not conscious of that. And so this identification with ourselves as this version of ourselves, which is why you often hear people say, no, this is just who I am. I'm just
I can't change. Yeah, this is just who I am. I won't change. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or even in a relationship, just love me for who I am. But it's who you are, who you really are.
Mm-hmm.
Or is it who you've been conditioned to be? And so the degree to which we're holding on and conditioned is the degree to which we're not free. The degree to which we're holding on and conditioned is the degree to which we believe ourselves to be this conditioned version of ourselves. And that is ego. And so when you say surrender or stillness or let go, it's terrifying, because we feel like I am going to die. So when we can have awareness of our conditioning, that we're conditioned, and start having awareness of our conditioning, then we can understand that, we're not this set of patterns. We're not the ego. We're not this set of program and patterns and conditioning, that we actually believe ourselves to be this person, this persona, this character. It starts to shift your relationship to what you thought you were and who you thought you were. And you begin to realize, maybe I'm not who I thought I was. And we have to start questioning ourselves and who we are, and what we feel and what we believe. And I think that's the beginning of unraveling and opening and unconditioning.
Oh, absolutely. And just going inward, doing that healing journey. You know what I would really love for you to talk about, and I think this can go deeper into your own healing journey with your father, is when you did a meditation and your mom's spirit came and you asked her a very specific question, where you asked her, why did you pass away before father?
Yeah. Wow. So my mother passed away in 2017. Mm-hmm. And, she was the closest person to me, and I loved her deeply. And I got to spend an amazing year just being with her, and loving her. And we can go more into that if you want as well. But when she passed away, in my meditation, when she was already on the other side, I spoke to her spirit and I said, why did you go early? Because she was 10 years younger. So, it's kind of reasonable to think that he would go earlier. Mm-hmm. And she passed earlier. And she was maybe 73, I think, 72 or 3 when she passed. And I felt this message from her. And she said, the reason I passed away earlier was to gift you a relationship with your father. Because she knew that if she was around, I would be very connected with her. And even though I had made peace with him overall, I can't say we were super close. We didn't speak every day or every week. It just was when it was. And so I didn't hold any major charge with him. I was relatively fine. And I think I felt like I'd taken the relationship with my father as far as I could take it, because it takes 2 to tango, and so I felt like I'd done my part, and I just kind of let it be where it was. And so when she said to me, I died to gift you the relationship with your father, I understood her intention and her blessing, and I knew what I had to do. I knew that there was some energetic and karmic healing that I needed to facilitate with my father before he passed away. However long I didn't know at that time. That I felt that we were meant to, I was meant to facilitate the healing with our souls, so that when he passed away, I could be at peace, he would be at peace, and the next generations, you know, my children and their children could also benefit from the healing in generations between me and my father. And so that moment, I made a decision. I made a very distinct and clear decision, and I'll never forget. I decided in that moment that I was going to love my father profoundly, that none of the other stuff mattered. You know, even the little stuff like, well, it takes two to tango and it takes two to make a relationship happen. And if he doesn't call me, then, you know, I'm not going to call him because it's got to go both ways. I dropped everything. And I said, I love my dad. I love his soul. The fact that he doesn't know how to relate, he doesn't know how to have a relationship, it's just his culture. It's just his old school nature. It's just where he's at. None of that matters. All that really matters is I love him. The other shit doesn't matter. And if I love him, then why don't I just love him? End of story. No if, and, or buts. And so if I were to love him, what would that just look like? I said, I'm going to call my father as a duty, as a sacred duty, as a son to a father. Because I said to myself, I've been a shitty son. I had my reasons. I was as great a son as I could be. But I said, it's not for him. It's for myself. I'm going to show up as a highest possibility of a son, and I'm going to love his soul. I'm going to honor his soul, and I'm going to call this man every day of his life until he dies, however long, every day until he dies, as long as that is, and make sure he knows that he's loved, so that we can have the feeling, whether he calls me or not, whether he responds or not, whether, like, I'm going to drop any expectation from my father whatsoever, and I'm just going to love him because I love him. So that when that moment comes and he dies at the end of his life, I will be at peace. I will be at peace for how I've shown up. That's it. And he will know that he was loved. And so I began calling him every day. And I had 5 years with this man, and I began calling him every day. And my father, to be honest, is not an easy character on a human level. He's not an easy person on a human level, very challenging person on a human level. And I just said, I'm just going to love him. And I would just call him up every day just to check, no great conversation. It was just, I love you. How you doing? I love you. You know, how you feeling? And just checking up on him 5-10 minutes a day, 3 minutes a day, just checking up and loving and touching base and investing in the relationship. And I think after a few months, after a year, he began to change. He began to realize, wait a second, you know, what's going on? Like, no one's ever done this for me. What? And there was no expectation I had from him whatsoever. And it wasn't like we had great conversations. It was just me loving my father and me giving him that gift and me honoring his soul and me honoring the fact he gave me life and me honoring our karma together and just loving him. And I believe that, I think it's our job as the younger generations to evolve the next generations more. And it's our job to be better than the last generations because we have more tools. And so I just loved him. And I think that love melted his heart, and that love healed him, and that love, and there was such a sense of mutual respect and love and tenderness that came back from him, and respect and healing that happened for us in the years, that I know that healing is possible, because by the end, you know, the last few years, he was constantly saying, I respect you, I love you, I respect you. Things that I always wanted when I was a kid, but I gave up, but I didn't even care about. By the time I didn't care about it, finally it was coming back to me.
Wow.
And the healing was so real. The healing was so profound. I would fly to Ghana, where he was 4 or 5 times a year. In 5 years, I went 26 times to visit him. Wow. And to Ghana, and that's from LA to Ghana. That's like 2 days to get there, 2 days to get back. Yeah. And I would literally just sit for 4 or 5 days. That's it, with him in his room, and not leave his room for 5 days at a time. Not go out anywhere, just me in a room with him for 5 days. and just be with him, and just honor his soul. And the karmic healing was so profound and so healing that if anyone is wondering, is healing possible with their parents? It is. If anyone is wondering, is it worth it? It is. But you have to give up changing them. You have to give up wanting them to be different. You have to give up communicating in order to get a response. And you just have to commit to the loving. They may never change. You have to give up you have to surrender the idea of the relationship that you thought you wanted with them. You have to let that go. Because for me, what I realized is I was so attached to an idea of a relationship I wanted with my father. We all have this idea of what we didn't get and, the relationship we'd like to have. You have to give that up. Give up the idea of the relationship you'd want with them so that you are able to receive what they are able to give you. Because when you're so attached to what you want from them, that they may not be able to give you, I started to realize that he just is not capable of it. It doesn't mean he doesn't love me. Doesn't mean he has any intention. He's just like a 5-year-old can't drive your car. A monkey can't make you dinner. A 1-year-old can't fly an airplane. And so I just realized that my father, based on his culture and his upbringing, his generation, just didn't have an emotional capacity. And his father wasn't there for him, and his father wasn't there for his father. And so somebody at some point has to break the chain of karma. And I believe that if you listen to this conversation, it's you, me. We have to be the ones that say the generational patterns, the generational karma, the generational traumas, the generational dysfunctions, the generational addictions, the generational patterns, the generational karma ends with me here today. And that's the choice we all get to make. I think we have to be better than our previous generations. And so that's what I did. And so much healing happened. And my father passed away November the 13th, 2022. But I knew it was coming. I was preparing for 3 years because I saw it.
Oh, wow.
But I felt like the timing of it all was perfect, because I think that by the time it happened, he was sufficiently at peace and I was more than at peace. And so, to be honest, I'm not going to say it wasn't a big deal, but it wasn't a big deal because I'd been preparing for 3 years and I was so at peace that there was nothing else for me to give him. There was nothing else. I'd given him everything. And so I think that's what happens when you give everything and you surrender and you give everything. Like, I think had I not loved fully, I would have been full of regret and pain and sadness when he died. But because I had kind of completed the mission and the karma with him and surrendered to that process, when he died, there was a moment of grieving. But to be honest, it was complete very quickly. And I was at peace very quickly because I had done what I needed to do with him,
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that beautiful story. I have to tell you and share something with you. When I was listening to that specific episode, I actually cried because you were speaking to my soul. And there was a lot of healing that happened to me just in those 40 minutes of you talking about the different lessons you had with your father. Because I resonate with you on, it's our turn to make a difference. We don't have to wait for the sorry. We don't have to wait for the other person to come up and to give us the things that I know we can do within ourselves. Is it going to take more time? Absolutely. But are we not worth it? Are we not worth investing in ourselves on a soul level? And I think a lot of people underestimate the power of love. And I think that power of love can really heal somebody from the inside out. And so when we start the healing, because energy is contagious, we start healing the lineage itself, whether they're here or not here. And I think that your mom coming at that moment to give you that message, you understood the mission because of the self-awareness and the stuff that God already has been preparing you for that moment in order to continue walking this beautiful path of purpose. And so that's why I really wanted you to be a part of this episode, is because I love your story, I love your heart, and I love your soul work. I think there's so much that you have done on yourself. And the art of surrender is not an easy task. I myself have gone through ego death after ego death after ego death, and it really feels like something inside of you is dying. And it's not always the easiest, especially when you feel like you're by yourself. And for me, it was co-creating with the divine. Even when my parents told me this is the right path, I knew deep down it was not the right path. And I had to muster the courage, like yourself, to be like, I have to follow what God's telling me, even though I know my parents want the best for me, but God knows what's best for me. Sure. So I resonate with your beautiful story, and I'm just so grateful that we've had the time to co-create. And there's two things I want to ask you. The first thing is, what about for the people who've had, abusive parents or narcissistic parents or traumatizing parents? And there's a part of them that wants to heal, but maybe it's unsafe for them to go and, call their mom or dad every day. Is there something that they can just do on their own to get that peace?
Yes. I'll reference one small thing I said earlier, which is why, yes, if you have abusive parents, narcissistic parents, toxic parents, difficult parents, wow, I know it's not easy. And so, it's not a light conversation, because some of us, look, I've 20 some years, I've worked with people in every single imaginable possible cross-section of humanity. I've heard stories with people with their parents that would shock you in terms of what people have been through with parents. And I have seen people that have been through unimaginable stuff with their parents, like stuff I could not even imagine going through. I've seen them forgive, and I've seen them heal. So what I do know is it is possible. I do know it is available. I do know that possibility exists, and it is happening. So I just want to hold that open for people, even though it's not hard, and that's not to minimize anything that anyone has been through. And so I do believe that on that spiritual level, we are souls, that we incarnate into this human experience in order to learn, to grow, to evolve, that life is a university for our soul's evolution. In every experience, every relationship, our parents, every person, that's really part of the teacher and the curriculum in our soul's education, our soul's evolution. And that the purpose of why we're here is to learn, to grow, to evolve, to learn the lessons, and to realize and remember who we truly are in the midst of all of this chaos and density and 3D world. And so I think if we understand that, then we can look at life and look at relationships and look at our parents a little differently. When we understand that, then we don't just have to see our parents as these people that are parents, that I owe them and they owe me, but as souls and as our teachers in this evolutionary school called life. And that I think we incarnate into a parental and family system that tends to be our major, if your life is university, like this is our major lessons with our family, our major karma with our family, and it tends to be a bit more intense. And so if you see life that way, it can maybe give you a different way of relating to the whole process, to allow some space where you start seeing them as souls on their own journey too. And so I believe that on that level, we all have the perfect parents for our soul's evolution. Let me repeat. I'm not saying we have the perfect parents, but we all have the perfect parents for our soul's evolution. And if we're souls and you look at life from a soul perspective, then it becomes less about what they did and what they didn't do and what they should have done and the surface stuff, not to condone that. But part of the focus becomes, what is my soul seeking to learn in relationship with them? What is my soul seeking to evolve through in relationship to them? What have I incarnated in order to learn from them? What have I incarnated in order to work through with them? What is the classroom that I am in with them? Because all lessons are repeated until learned. And just like you do university for 4 years in the US, then you do a master's program, and then you do a doctorate, and then you graduate. And so I believe that when we learn the lessons, we can graduate that level of lesson and experience. And so if you start focusing on what is the lesson that my soul is seeking to work out with them, to learn with them, what are they teaching me? What is this classroom? And I think when we learn the lessons, where we're at with them, then we can, regardless of what they do or don't do, we can transcend, we can evolve, we can transcend that experience. Because when we don't, and we stay stuck in blame and victimhood with them, which we may have many, right reasons to. I'm not saying we're not right. The challenge is we'll just keep ourselves stuck. And even when even if we don't speak to them, even if they're dead, if we don't resolve the lessons with them, we will just recreate situations in our lives with lovers, with husbands, with spouses, with partners, with bosses, with people that recreate the energetic vibration lessons, patterns with them that we haven't resolved in other spaces and places in our lives. And so what we have to understand is, yes, with some parents, it may not be healthy to engage. It may not be safe to engage directly, have a conversation, go meet them. Maybe they're crazy and it's just a waste of time. But that doesn't mean you can't heal. Understand the lesson. Resolve the lesson. Explore the lesson. Learn the lesson. That's an inner process. And remember that true healing has nothing to do with the other person. At the deepest level, it would look, in an ideal world, it would be lovely that we could sit down with our parents, and we can do that for our children, right? In this next generation, we sit down with our with our kids to come and say, I'm sorry, for the things I did. I'm sorry that I was not conscious. I'm sorry. And there can be healing. And then the next generation evolves, and the next generation is better than us, and their generation is better than us. And before you know it, kids are born into an enlightened state from the beginning. That's the ideal. That's the evolutionary trajectory. But it would be ideal that our parents sat down with us and apologized and made amends and did all of that amazing stuff. That would be the ideal, but it's not always possible. So if you wait till they do that, you are giving away your power. If you wait till they do that, you are keeping yourself stuck. Nothing and no one is worth your freedom. And so I just encourage you to realize that you can heal no matter what. Your healing is not dependent on them. I'm not saying it couldn't be aided by them, but it's not dependent on them. To truly get complete with another person, with your parent, is not just about your relationship with them out here. It's about your relationship with your parent within yourself. It's about the relationship with your parent within yourself. In that internal relationship is what you can heal regardless of them. So take your power back. Don't wait for them and go inside. I had to get in touch with my pain, get in touch with my anger, get in touch with my rage, get in touch with my resentment, get in touch with my hurt to my father. And he had no idea. He didn't even know. We never even spoke about it my entire life. We never had a conversation from age 20 to, we've never spoken about the stuff that have happened since I was a kid. But I was able to find a way to resolve it within myself. And I think when you realize that, that's the freedom. Now, just because you heal, one of the things that keeps people hooked is the desire to still have a relationship with them. It might mean you heal, you forgive, you make peace, and it might mean that you may never have the kind of relationship with your parents that you would like, because they haven't changed and they're not capable. So that means two things. Either you just don't have a relationship with them, not from a place of anger, but from a place of acceptance and peace. Like, look, every time I get around my parents, they're abusive, they scream, they shout, they throw things, they're inappropriate, they're toxic, and it just is not healthy. So I love you, I bless you, I pray for you, I send you love and energy as a soul, and I don't harbor any anger because I'm dealing and healing that within myself, but I bless you. And I know that I cannot put myself in the physical proximity with you as my parent. That would be self-loving, right? That would be acceptance of self-loving. You just might have to love them from afar. So that's something that sometimes we don't want to accept. So you may have to accept that you may not be able to have a relationship with them, and you may have to love them from afar. And or if you say, well, I still want to see them, that's great. But then you have to accept the nature of where they are at. And you have to stop wanting them to change. So for instance, if every time you get together with your parent, they hit you over the head with a baseball bat, you have to be aware that every time you get together with them, they're going to hit you with a baseball bat and not expect that to be any different, and just kind of be ready for that. And that might mean you don't spend a week with them. You might just spend an hour with them. That might mean you don't spend an hour with them. You can only be with them on the phone. And so then you get to choose the best format and way that you want to relate to them based on the acceptance of where they're at. So you can still get together with them. You just might have to realize, oh, I can't see them for a weekend. I can only see them for an hour coffee, because after an hour, they go crazy. They start their patterns. And so you just have to be intentional, conscious, and responsible in how you're going to choose to relate to them from a place of accepting who they are.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much for the divine wisdom. And, for our listeners, I hope you know that there are multiple paths to your own freedom and your own happiness and divine love and surrendering through the process. And for you, Kute, when you're going through life's challenges, how are you finding the peace within yourself to continue walking this conscious path? Because this is what finding the oasis is within is all about, is how do we find our oasis? How do we find our peace within ourselves? So for you on your journey, how do you find that peace within yourself to continue walking?
This sounds funny, but the word is surrender. For me, the key has been surrender. The key is surrender. The key continues to be surrender. And so for me, my surrender is just like my prayer has become more and more just universe, God, divine. I surrender to the highest good. I invoke the highest good. I ask that the highest good be done. And so I think in any challenging moment, it's the password is surrender, and it's, I wish I had something more profound to say other than that, but I really feel and have experienced that it is the key to freedom. It is the key, because when you let go, when you surrender, you take the limits off of life, and that's when grace can flow. That's when magic can flow. That's when the universe and the innate intelligence does the work, and that's the healing.
I know this more than you know. Trust me. I feel that on a very deep, deep level. And, before we started, I told you that I had a story to share with you on what I would love to end the show with, which I normally give my guests either to do an affirmation, words of wisdom, or prayer. But 2 nights ago, I went into meditation for about 2 hours and I ended up falling asleep. So I entered a different dimension. And when I was in that dimension, I was preparing for our podcast because I wanted you to be on the show. Apparently, I was in some sort of different space. So my actual setup was not set up. So I was running all over the place, had lots of stress, lots of anxiety. And then you show up and I said, Kute, I'm so sorry. I'm just going to have you just wait for a little bit. Let me get everything set up. So you wait patiently. But I can feel that you were starting to get a little frustrated. And so, as I'm running around, you grab me and you say, Tamara, let's pray. Let's pray. Sit with me and let's pray. And so we conjoined our hands and you started praying. And so when I woke up from that meditation, I knew that this specific episode needed a beautiful prayer from your heart. And so I would love for us to conjoin and for us to take a deep conscious breath together to ground. And for you to speak a prayer that channels through you specifically about family, if you're open to that.
Sure. Okay. Let's take
dear.
a deep breath, everyone. Tune into your breath, tune into your spirit, tune into your soul. And in this moment, we invoke grace. We invoke the light of grace, the light of spirit, to bless our families. As we send this love and this light to honor our parents, those that birthed us, those that took care of us, our caretakers. And as we send this love and this light of healing and energy and compassion all the way back through our entire lineage of everyone we are connected to, that we are conscious of, and everyone that we are connected to that we're not even aware of in our lineage. And we send pure light and love and healing, compassion and gentleness, understanding, all the way back through our entire lineage of all the lines, of all the connections. We send it all the way back to the beginning. We can even see any faces of people we're aware of. But this love and this light and this healing energy can flow all the way back to the beginning of time, to the many souls that we're not aware of, that even psychically and energetically we have been connected to and have been influenced by in some way, and that we ask in this moment that any bonds of karma, unresolved patterns, addictions, dysfunctions, generational patterns, that in this moment, whatever is ready to be released, be removed, be cleared, be let go. And we invoke forgiveness, grace, and healing. So we send this energy back, all the way back to the beginning of time, and into the future. So we bless our future generations, that the future generations may be blessed and restored and healed by this moment, by this love, and by this prayer. So it is.
And so it is. I'm so happy I listened to my intuition. Thank you so much, Kute. That was such a beautiful, profound, and divine prayer. And where can people know more about you?
The book, The Magic of Surrender, is on paperback on Amazon, so check it out there. If people want to know more about my work in general, they can go to Kute Blackson, my website, Kute, KuteBlackson.com. If folks inspired by the conversation want to go deeper, twice a year I do an event to Bali, and if someone is maybe feeling like they're ready for the next level, or maybe you feel a deep calling to make a difference in humanity, that you know that you've been put on the planet for a purpose bigger than yourself, and you're ready to heal, transform, and catapult, then twice a year I do an event to Bali. It's my last year doing this event. I've done 20 of these events in the last 10 years or so. This is number 21. July the 28th till August the 8th is the next Bali event, and people can find out more at www.boundlessblissbali.com. That's boundlessblissbali.com. And yes, people can find me on Instagram and Facebook.
I'll be sure to link everything for you guys as well. And Kute, I just want to say that I'm dedicating this specific episode to your parents.
Thank you.
To your beautiful, soul journey. And I honor them and their spirits. I've been feeling that they've been actually roaming around us on this episode. So
awesome.
I'm honoring them. And then for you listeners, I hope that you got what you needed out of this episode. And please know that I'm sending you all the divine love and support on your journey. Take care.